What is your, oh poo? I've got to get the hell outta here right now. Story, by AskReddit.
Was sleeping at a friend's house, went to the kitchen to get some water, her father hugged me from behind. I was 14, I guess. Never went to their house again.
When I was 15, I went to a friend's place. Her dad was smoking in the kitchen and, when he saw his daughter brought friends over, he got excited and started flirting with a few of us. It was super skeezy. When I got home, I gave my dad a big hug and said, "I'm really happy you never hit on any of my friends." He was silent for a moment and looked a little confused. Then he finally said, "Way to have low standards there, sweetheart."
Your dad's reaction somehow made it wholesome to me. He seems like a good person.
Yes, but I would also have questions and concerns if my daughter said that to me.
Gross and bad. Living in Baltimore some years back, and I was driving home through a rough area of the city. Sitting at a stoplight behind an already stopped car, another pulls up next to me on the right. Not really thinking anything of this, the light turns green. Neither of these cars move and I see a car zipping up behind me. I look to my left and I see two guys running towards me. I am so thankful that I left a good deal of space between me and the car in front. I hooked it around the car I front and sped off. Pretty sure I was going to be a victim of a carjacking or maybe something worse. Glad they ill-timed their plan and I gave myself that space. Lesson here is always keep your head on a swivel in Baltimore.
Guy the first knew stopped behind a car at a stop street. As soon as he stopped, the people in the car in front of him jumped out and ran to the back of their car, so towards him. He reversed and hit the car behind him. The people in front ran around their car to the opposite sides. They were just switching seats, drivers.
I was driving north on I-65 in the middle of Indiana. The sky was getting dark, the wind was picking up, it started hailing. I turned on the radio to hear that a tornado was nearby. I determined it was behind me going from SW to NE and about to cross over the interstate. Other cars were driving slow or pulling over because of the rain and hail. I was hauling ass to get away from there.
I go through a tornado video binge every couple years, and recently learned that sometimes the tornado will just blend in with the other clouds or darkness such that you might not even know you're driving towards one. So scary to realize that you can not even know it's right in front of you. Edit, a few people have mentioned that these are called rain-wrapped tornadoes. Thanks for letting me know. That's useful. Also, I checked out Pico's Hank, and I'm watching his 2020 summary while I eat my lunch. Thanks to all those who recommended him. He's the type of quality storm chasing content you want. I figured I'd mention as well that I've never seen a serious tornado in real life, except 3 pretty cool water spouts on a lake here in BC when I was a kid. Maybe it's just my memory lying to me, but I could swear I remember fish being tossed onto the road. I've also seen some pretty mean looking clouds in Alberta, but I never witnessed them turn into anything serious.
Great, now I'm afraid of stealth tornadoes and my country doesn't even have tornado season.
I'm in the UK and apparently we have loads of tornadoes, just they're not at all impressive. There was that one in Birmingham that managed to knock down a chimney. I've seen one, a long skinny thing doing not a whole lot. Looked up Tornado UK and found out that we do in fact get all the weathers, just mild versions.
The UK actually has the most tornadoes per square kilometer, but they're so weak they're almost never given an enhanced Fujita scale rating.
I lived in South Everett, Washington for a couple years. Was walking home from the bus stop to my apartment, which took me behind the Home Depot. Suddenly a van starts following me. I hear the side door slide open and look behind me to see a man with the top half of his body hanging out the slider door looking at me. I took off running towards my apartment, literally running as far as I could. The van started going faster. By chance a guy was pulling out of the driveway of my apartment complex, sees me running for my life, and stops. The van immediately turns around and speeds off. Guy asks if I'm okay. I ask him to just stay there and please watch me walk into my apartment, which was the building next to his. He did, thank God. I started carrying mace and a very large knife the next day.
One of my good friends was stabbed in Shea Everett. I'm sorry that happened to you and that it can be such a rough place.
Oh, F this, man, this sucks that this happens. I'm so glad you are okay.
Thanks. Me too. I grew up in Montana, so the Seattle area, Everett included, was a huge shock to me. It literally never occurred to me that something like that might happen, much less in the middle of the day.
I was in downtown NYC a couple of blocks away from the WTC gawking at a fire. There were tons of people milling around watching. They had blocked off some streets, and I asked a cop how I could get around to where I needed to go further downtown. He told me which streets were closed, but that they might expand it, so I should get moving. The conversation was pretty casual. As I started walking away, I looked back, and he had his radio to his ear, and whatever he heard, he panicked, went as white as a ghost, and started yelling for people to move further back. I turned around and jogged the hell out of there and made it to the Brooklyn Bridge before the first tower came down.
Jogged the hell out of there. I don't think I've ever read that phrase before.
Well, I was wearing a suit and dress shoes, and to be honest, there's a social pressure, even in that moment, that makes running through a of people standing around or walking on a city street pretty difficult.
A 500-pound hog got loose at the state fair and started charging right at me. I've never run so fast in my life.
People think pigs are cute or silly, but a mother sow can remove limbs.
Worse still, the boars will corner you with no chance of escape and then tell you incredibly uninteresting stories for several hours.
Once upon a barren moor, there dwelled a bear. Also a boar. The bear could not bear the boar. The boar thought the bear a bore. At last the bear could bear no more, that boar that bored him on the moor. So one morn he bored the boar will bore the bear no more.
I was solo camping in the woods during a phase where I wanted to be a survival expert. I hiked out, miles from any roads or building, built a shelter and then hiked back the way I came. Less than a mile away from my camp, I found a dead coyote, decapitated, gutted, and laid out like a sacrifice or something. The eyes were gouged out and it was strung across a big, flat rock. A rock which I used as a marker on the way in, so I know it hadn't been there a day before. I ran out of there as fast as I could, knife at the ready, probably 10 miles back to my house. I still have no idea who would have done it, but I know I didn't want to run into them in the woods alone.
Sounds like that day you were a survival expert.
A true survival expert never leaves his house. Tap's head.
Plot twist, they were sacrificing it for you.
This is smart. If this was a horror movie, you would have checked it out and you would have discovered something crazy but probably end up dying or something. Would have been a good movie.
Now I imagine that there is a whole series of horror movies you never have heard about, because the main character sees freaky stuff, nopes right out at the start, runs home and credits roll because his life was completely normal and happy from then on, meaning everyone is actually so incredibly stupid in the well-known horror movies due to a non-survivorship bias.
This is low-key the biggest comment on the thread. That's some next-level poo.
No telling if they would have graduated to human sacrifice, given the lone camper presenting themselves.
This is how supernatural episodes start.
St. Patrick's Day, midnight. I, 26 at the time, was walking home from the Irish bar I worked in. Saw a lad attack a girl and run. Checked on the lass to make sure she was all right, stayed with her until the police arrived. Gave my statement, told them I was nervous about walking home. 2 guys who were on the scene offered to walk me home. Policeman said, "There you go, you're sorted." That's right, sent me off with 2 strangers. I scolded myself for being so nervous, told myself it was really nice of them to offer to walk me home. We were about halfway to my house when they started talking about what they'd witnessed, how that girl deserved to be attacked, and that their friend, the attacker, had done nothing wrong. My spidey senses weren't just tingling. They were electrifying. We were coming up to the last populated street before the dark alleyway and then the park that I needed to walk through to get home. I knew if I kept walking with these guys, I was in danger. I just effing knew. I checked my phone and told them my friend was in the conveniently nearest club just across the road, thanked them for their offer to walk me home, and headed to the club entry before they could say anything. Jumped in a taxi. As we drove past the alleyway, those FRs were waiting for me. They'd called my bluff about going into the club, and they were watching out for me. I don't know what they'd have done to me, but that's my biggest, listen to your instincts, story, and I'm really effing glad I did. I was kicking myself because my manager, who was also my friend, mutual crush, had offered to walk me home, but I didn't want him having to walk all the way home himself in the other direction after.
A coworker got off the bus at night in Scarborough, Ontario, and a guy stepped out from behind the bus shelter and started calling to her to wait up. He ran up to her, she screamed, "I don't know you," and ran into a convenience store. The guy hung around outside for a few minutes, then walked over to a vehicle and got in and drove off. She waited for a neighbor in her apartment complex to come over and walk her home. She filed a police report and it turned out she had narrowly escaped Paul Bernardo, then known as the Scarborough Rapist, later known as a serial killer, alongside his wife Carla Homolka.
I was walking to my house from my ex-house very early in the morning when I saw this little girl with a backpack running for her life from two big street dogs. At that moment I didn't think and I ran towards the dogs and missed a kick. The two dogs came after me, biting my legs and arm. They were out of control and these were like the longest 5 minutes of my life. I couldn't stop them from biting me. The little girl kept running until I didn't see her anymore. It was just me and the dogs attacking me. I tried to climb a fence to get inside a house but I couldn't when a taxi driver stopped and went out of the car with a short stick and he tried to scare him off, giving me a chance to run, and without thinking I got inside the car. The guy just ran a couple of times around the car with the dogs behind until he got in and he drove off like really fast. He took me to the hospital where I got a lot of stitches on my legs, arms and hands. That guy is my hero. Every now and then I go to his taxi stop and give them sandwiches or something. We never knew what happened to those dogs.
You probably saved that kid's life.
More than likely. The damage a dog can do to a child is horrific. OP's a feckin' hero.
Yeah, not even to just young children. A approximately 14-year-old girl where I grew up was killed a few years back by a few dogs.
You are also a hero.
One time I was driving through Kansas in the middle of the night with my girlfriend on a road trip. Summer of 2017, we had issues with the car breaking down in Nebraska, and were spudding along until we reached Colby, Kansas, and waited for night so the roads were less busy. As we were driving along, not HWY 70 but just south to stay off the highways, a semi caught up to us. The car didn't want to go past 50 to 60 miles per hour, and I didn't want to push it and break down. Needless to say, I was going too slow for this semi-truck. For about an entire hour this guy is riding my ass, flashing his lights, etc. Never honked his horns though. I would slow down and pull off to the side a little bit to let him pass, but every time I did he would slow down too and give me a ton of space. It's now about 2 to 3 a.m. We are in the middle of nowhere coming up close to the border of Colorado. He is still constantly riding up to my ass and turning his lights on and off again. We finally come across a gas station and pull over to a pump on the right side. I cannot emphasize how literal I mean by middle of nowhere. It's flat deserts forever in all directions. It's an empty shell gas station that is closed and dark AF. We hope the truck will just pass us and we pretend to pump gas. This effing truck slows down all the way and stops right there on the road next to us. He proceeds to back his truck up enough to pull into the gas station behind us, perpendicular to our car. I start losing my poo and looking around. I am standing outside of my car, and my girlfriend is screaming for me to get back in the car. This guy gets out of the semi and starts walking directly towards us. He is only about 50 yards away when I notice a small brown pickup truck sitting on the back side of the shell, eerily placed. I notice there is someone in it. I run towards him. As I get closer I realize there is a police badge painted on the side of this brown pickup and the man inside is actually an officer. I can only imagine what this guy on late night duty was thinking when I am running up to him. He rolls down the window with a confused look on his face. My girlfriend is screaming at me in panic as this guy gets within 10 yards of the car, while I am spitting about 50 words out of my mouth in about 2 seconds explaining our situation. The officer doesn't say a word and just drives around our car. The man notices and does an immediate U-turn back towards his truck, as the officer is yelling at him to stop. I hop back into my car, look in the rear view mirror for a second to see the officer getting out to try to talk to this guy. I turn on the car, hit the gas, and drive into Colorado a few minutes later. I will spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if that officer wasn't just sitting there that night. Whoever you are, man, bless your soul. Edit, Street View for the curious. Edit 2, a lot of people keep suggesting that the driver was trying to indicate that maybe a light was out on my car or something. Trust me, that was the first thing I checked at the gas station when I got out of the car. The only thing wrong with my car was its inability to accelerate past 50 miles per hour without sputtering. Also, I was driving at night because the heat was about 100 F. We needed a break from driving through Nebraska, and there is less traffic to worry about at night. We didn't get the car fixed right away because we needed to get to a gig in southern Colorado that weekend, which made us enough money to fix the car. Yes, we were living out of the car, tense, and often spent a ton of time driving through the nights or sleeping in random places in the middle of nowhere. Also, this took place as Sharon Springs, Kansas, and the shell is now a Phillips 66, or at least according to Google Maps.
I'm from Kansas. Can confirm that part is very middle of nowhere. Glad you were able to live to tell the story.
Is this a good time to mention that there's about 24 active serial killers working as long-haul truckers in the US right now? Edit. I misread one of the sources because it was late. There are 25 currently in prison and at least 10 active as of 2009. I woke up one Friday in a hotel and the internet was down. I went to the hotel lobby to see what was up, and saw scenes of chaos on the TV. A crowd had started to gather to watch, including the hotel staff. One employee told me the government had shut down the internet to test it. The scenes on the TV were of violent protests beginning all over Egypt as people made their first push to occupy Tahrir Square. It was January 25, 2011 and I was in Benghazi, Libya. Without my US passport, needless to say I spent my energy over the next few days trying to get out of the country. I was able to leave, but many of the people I was working with weren't as lucky. The revolution started in Benghazi less than 2 weeks later. It was surreal watching Anderson Cooper broadcasting live from the hotel I had just been staying in. Edit. A bunch of people asked about my passport, so I'll elaborate further. I'm actually paranoid about giving up my passport when I travel, so it was an odd story how that happened. It was my second trip, and I always brought color copies of my passport to give when someone asked for it, so I'd never hand over my original. My first trip I traveled with someone who had been to Libya multiple times. I'm an architect and we were working for a Turkish contractor. They requested the passport that first trip to get a stamp. I initially refused and said I would do it myself if needed. The other architect was more senior and explained they just used a runner to take it to the police station and get a stamp, which was required if you stay longer than a week. He showed me his, so I backed down and let them have it. I got it back that day and it had the stamp. On my second trip they requested the passport for the same process, but I still didn't have it back by the third day when the internet was shut off. I called our company from the hotel to get a plane ticket to Istanbul. The next flight was on a Saturday afternoon. The client had my passport and didn't want us to leave because they were afraid we'd trigger a panic at the job site. So they kept claiming they didn't have my passport back yet. We ended up in a full-blown shouting match demanding it back when we were in danger of missing the flight out. They finally gave it back after we started threatening to call our company and walk away from the project. The stress didn't end there, because my passport didn't have the stamp once it was returned. I was stopped when going through customs trying to leave, and it was clear they were having a conversation about the missing stamp. They ended up letting me go, but I didn't feel like I could take a breath till I was in the air. I had been communicating with a close friend via text throughout all this. I didn't want to worry my wife about the situation. He knew to contact her if I stopped responding. I called her that Saturday night from Istanbul to tell her what had happened and that I was no longer in the country.
What is one actually supposed to do in a situation like that? Is there a checklist for revolutions and the like?
Whenever there's an imminent war, the U.S. Embassy usually recommends all American nationals leave the country, or go to the embassy for assistance in leaving, because eventually the embassy and all State Department staff will also evacuate. In Libya, there was the whole Benghazi scandal which resulted in the U.S. ambassador and CIA staff being killed.
Some architect friends of mine were in Libya working on a government complex when they both got messages, then phone calls from the British Embassy saying get to the airport or British Embassy now. Don't go back to the hotel, not even to get your passport. They left the meeting and got straight to the airport and got on the first flight to any European country, without passports, using some other papers an official gave them in the airport. The civil war was on the news by the time they got back to the UK.
Damn, that's nice the way they handled it. Props to them.
My dad was in Libya around that time. He has a lot of respect for the Kia Cerato, as he spent 8 hours under a blanket in the boot, being effectively smuggled out. Apparently it was a surprisingly comfy ride.
I worked for an agency that helps people do their daily tasks for home healthcare. I had a man whose insurance prohibited personal care, like a shower. He was very upset during my visit when I declined his request for bathing. I felt bad at first, but soon the man became very angry with me. He accused me of all kinds of things and started pacing around room to room like he was looking for something. Between that and his spit-yelling rage, I slipped out of the house and drove to a safer place. I reported the incident to my employer and later found out that this person is a sex offender who had previously RPD another woman. Who knows what he was planning that day? Maybe nothing, but I'm glad I left. Edit, sorry if this will be bad formatting. Thank you for the awards. I am sad to hear about similar situations being shared. Always trust your instinct. A lot of people that I see are very physically capable but have difficulties in other areas of their lives. This was the only person I ever saw with this particular insurance and the only time I've ever seen personal care prohibited. Edit 2. The agency background checks us but not the people we see. We see a lot of people and I imagine it's cost related to just take them in on good faith. My coworker actually ran the background check and showed me how. I started using the database after this incident to keep myself informed when I get suspicious. It is free and available online. Unfortunately, any other questions or concerns can really just be answered with the $sign. It's the sad truth. Thanks for all of your input. I did not expect this many updates. Just remember that you have instincts for a reason and to trust them even if you think you are being silly or paranoid. It could save your life.
The agency should have revealed that you were going to a known sex offender's house. WTF.
F that. If they knew he were a sex offender, they shouldn't have let her go at all, by herself at least. That's a two-person job with a panic button readily available. Edit, or yes, send a man. I wrote that originally, but I couldn't get it to not sound sexist, in one way or another, so I just didn't write it.
The agency was practically setting up a situation where OP was in serious danger and didn't make them aware of it. I'm not a lawyer, but that seems like something they could end up in court over, if anything happened.
Just reminded me of a moment when I did aid work and I was bathing a lady with Down syndrome. She lives with her adult brother in basically a two-story shack. I have no idea how that house stayed warm, let alone standing during our winters, but it looked old, run down, and sadly it was the hoarder house, with 5 broken down trucks, the Confederate flag, lots of metal and debris in the yard. My boss had called me on my day off because she knew I always said yes to overtime and I was reliable. The regular aide had called out. If I'd have known what I do now, I'd never have agreed to take that shift that day. I was only to be there for 2 hours, help her shower, eat lunch and do the wash. I pull up and I'm already concerned about it because the address didn't work in my GPS and we're talking 2014, so it was that time where it was odd if it wasn't listed. I walk in and brother is mid-50s in his bedroom, which I can see into because all the walls were sheets. Yes, just sheets hanging up basically on a clothesline hung inside to create boxes or rooms. As I'm awaiting the sister to be done, I hear heavy breathing that's not from her, glance over to the shirtless brother pounding his meat and staring at me. I froze. I was 22 years old and had no clue what to do. I had a client in the shower and her brother is beating his meat at me. Feverishly. I finished her shower and just left. Got in my car and drove away about 10 feet and slammed my brakes in the middle of the road. Called my boss and was like, WTF. Apparently he had done this to the last girl too. From there our agency contacted the sister's social worker and I never saw her name on the list again, so I'm hopeful she was removed and placed in the nearby facility.
What the hell? I can't believe he did that to the last woman and your boss didn't say anything and still let you go alone? That's so messed up. I was on a restaurant and they were using a propane tank to power an outdoors heater. Suddenly the tank started to catch fire and I got out quickly because I thought it was going to explode. The staff turned the tank off and everyone laughed at me for overreacting, but damn, I got scared, lol.
Oh, what AP, you're afraid of exploding propane tanks.
Said the Barb Dildo Shutter.
They laughed at you for running from fire? I always side-eye those things. I don't like sitting too close to them.
You didn't overreact. If one of those tanks blows, they can shoot 30 feet in the air. I've seen it.
My friend and I met at Waffle House for lunch. A guy came into the restaurant looking for a piece of paper that he had accidentally left on a table. The waitress didn't know where the paper was located and might have thrown it away. The guy got upset saying the paper was important and he was going home to get his gun stored under his mattress. My friend and I quickly paid our check and got the heck out of the restaurant.
Yep. That's Waffle House.
Each Waffle House is either a happy haven of laughter, dancing and good times, or a DGIE hangout with a rat problem. There is no in between.
The same Waffle House can be either of those things, depending on the time of day. Source: lived near a Waffle House for 2 years.
True. Best time to eat at Waffle House is either at 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. with all the old-timers or 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. with all the friendly drunk people. The 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. is a crapshoot. Either the very unfriendly drunk people begin to show up, or the casual insomniacs and night shifters do.
I was the only white guy working at a Hispanic restaurant and I don't speak Spanish, that's part of it. One night after work I get invited to drink at one of their houses. All is going good, we're drinking and I even danced a bit. Then after going outside to the back patio to smoke a cigarette I come back inside and the guy whose house I was at has a knife and is yelling at these 3 coworkers of mine, blocking the front door, yelling in Spanish that no one is leaving. I knew that much. A bar patron who knew me grabbed me and pleaded to the guy just to let me and him out since we had no part in it. The homeowner lets us both out. I asked the bar patron WTF was that when we're outside since I can't speak Spanish, and he says the guy thinks my 3 coworkers are sleeping with his wife and he's probably about to kill them. I got in my car and got the F out of there.
Sue, what happened to the co-workers?
Well, they all showed up to work the next day alive, and when I asked what happened, all my main man Humberto said is loco noche.
I understand how this would feel weird to the random Anglo. Most of my friends are Mexican and you have to understand how the culture works. You just let the guy do his knife thing until he calms down. Then the next day you go back to effing his wife. Edit. Holy poo, thanks for the awards guys. That was an iffy comment and wasn't sure how it was gonna go down. Now, let me get back to effing Humberto's wife already. Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.